Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic was requested by a listener on social media. So thank you very much for the request. I love when people make requests, because that way I know at least one person will listen. So this request is in regards to training, and kind of the more general aspect of the request was how to improve technique retention during moving events. So this person in particular is a strongman, and an example of this be like a log clean and press, is when they clean the log up to the chest and they're getting ready for the press, how do they stay in a good position? How do they stay stable in that position? Another would be like maybe like sandbag carries, farmer's carries, any event where basically like yoke walks even. How do they improve their ability to stay in a good position while their positioning is changing, if that makes sense? So maybe their feet are moving, but they need their core to stay tight, or they're moving something over their head, but again, they need their core to stay tight, or their hips in line, a certain position over their feet. So how do they do that? How do they get better at that? And this is actually can be stretched beyond just strongman. So CrossFit has an enormous amount of loaded moving events. So this would help for CrossFit lifters as well. And then also anybody doing kind of sport athletic movements. So movements you might use in, football, basketball, baseball, volleyball, softball, all those kind of like sports. So I wanted to go through this and kind of give a good general approach answer. Now this will have very specific things in it and it'll work for your sport, but I didn't want to make it specific to just strongman events because it doesn't have to be. So the things that would make you better and more stable for a log overhead press would be the same for an overhead squat, in CrossFit. So there's a lot of universal kind of concepts to this, so I figured it'd be best to approach the universal concepts and then help you guys learn how to apply them specifically to what you want. So one of the things I do with the clients that I train in person, and as much as I can online as well, with my online clients, is to teach them the reasons why we do what we do. So rather than having them memorize, this works for this, why? Why does it work? Like, it's better to learn the concept rather than learning or memorizing just key kind of like narrowed, focused aspects. So I do this a lot with personal trainers I educate online. So I have some personal trainers I work with, and we go over programming concepts to help them with their clients. And we try to cover as much as we can conceptual programming. So if we're going to talk about how to program with a client with a back injury, we don't want to learn just a couple bracing exercises. We want to learn why those exercises work. So if the trainer can learn that concept, they can then plug in any exercise that fits that concept, and they have a wealth of knowledge that they can apply over their whole future. So rather than giving them like a 4-week program that only works for 4 weeks, let's say, why does that program work? And then they can plug in any exercises they want that fits that category for the rest of their life. So it's much better to learn conceptual programming than it is to memorize individualized, narrowed, focused aspects. So we're going to take that same approach to today's topic. So again, it's improved technique retention during moving events. So the first thing we want to look at is core training. So the stronger the middle of your body is, the better you'll be able to maintain position through the middle. And guess where our limbs extend from? The middle. So if I have stronger core and hip positioning, then my legs are going to stay in a better position. If I have a stronger core and kind of like thoracic spine positioning, my arms, when placed overhead, are going to stay in a better position. So everything kind of extends from the center. So if we make that center super duper freaking strong, then everything else is going to go a little bit better too. So that's kind of the first place that we want to look at. And when we talk about core training, it's not just doing a bunch of crunches. That's absolutely, it's part of it. I was about to say it's a waste of time. It's not at all. It's just one component of many. So when we look at our core training, kind of what kind of relates to that would be your, we all know like our six-pack abs. like the rectus abdominis is part of our core, but more importantly is the obliques. So the obliques are more important for stabilization and bracing. And then also we have the psoas muscles, which are kind of like down in there, and they connect from the kind of the spine to the front of our hip. And if they're weak, it will limit your ability to hold on to a correct hip tilt in various positions. And so we want to strengthen that psoas muscle, so that way we can kind of pick the hip position that we want best for the exercise we're in, and then be able to lock that in and hold that. And then also we have the lower back. That's important for the core as well. And then we have glutes, because the glutes help aid in hip tilt position, and they can help take some of the forces away and kind of like aid in the help towards the lower back and the abs. So if we have strong kind of abdominal muscles, which is like your rectus abdominis, your obliques, and then we have a strong lower back and we have strong glutes, we're going to have a strong core. So you put all that together. So the best ways to train your obliques is to be very specific. So if I have an event where my goal is to lock my body in place and not move, then that's what I want to train my obliques at. So too many times people will train their obliques through a twisting motion, or like side bends or something like that. And it's not that those are bad, but that's not what you want your obliques to actually do. You want your obliques to lock down and not move. So you should probably challenge them in that exact pathway. So in that exact manner. So one of my favorite things is I have I forget what the technical name for the strap is, but it's a very long strap. It's about like 2.5, like 3 feet long, and it connects to a cable. You can do anyhow. It's from Spud Inc. If you guys have never heard of that company, Spud Inc. Down in South Carolina, they make really awesome material like straps and wraps and stuff like that for like sleds and strongman events. And they have this, I think it's called a long strap or an ab strap or something, that connects to like our cable station. So what I'll do is I'll put a good amount of weight on our cable station. I'll grab that strap and kind of extend my arms out in front of me and see if I can walk out sideways from the cable station and hold on to like a locked in position. So if you've never heard of Pallof holds, Pallof, Pallof, it's a guy's last name. He has Pallof holds or Pallof rotations or anti-rotations. So there's different movements, but one of the movements that that name is kind of connected with is a hold. So if I were to attach a band to something and I stand kind of sideways, so instead of my chest facing the band, I'm going to stand sideways to the band. I want to hold on to the band and extend my arms out in front of my body. So I'm kind of making an L, where the band is coming towards me, then my arms are going out in front of my body, standing sideways, so it's like an L kind of position. And then what happens is the band wants to pull you to rotate you towards it. However, you're going to lock your obliques and your ab muscles in to not allow yourself to rotate. So that's going to be some of your best ways of doing it. So anti-rotation, and then you can have anti, kind of like flexion, would be like one arm farmer's carries, one arm dumbbell carries. Like I've even had on our belt squat where I'll just connect a D-ring handle to the belt squat, and I'll kind of pop it loose and then see if I can just hold that position with that belt squat pulling down on me. Suitcase deadlifts is another one where it's a one-arm deadlift where you're standing sideways to the barbell. But you want to have anti-flexion, like sideways flexion, and you want to have anti-rotation. Those are the best ways to train your obliques. And in terms of training them towards movements that you don't want flexion and you don't want rotation. So if I don't want my obliques to flex or rotate, then I want to train them in manners that challenge them not to flex and rotate. So that sounds kind of common sense, but overwhelmingly people mess that up. Where they'll be doing exercises unrelated to what they want their muscle to do. And it's not that it's a bad stimulus. So like for example, ab wheel rollouts or barbell rollouts. The way most people do those, like if they're doing that to kind of get a stronger core for squat and deadlift, most people, when they do that exercise, they kind of like dump their lower back forward. They don't keep their hip tilt correct. And so they're doing this movement in a shitty position where their hips are just dumped forward. And then they're thinking that's going to translate to a squat in which their hip position has to be neutral. So they have to be mindful of, am I training the muscle in the manner in which I want it to be tested? So I'm training it to test it. Well, how is it going to be tested? So if I'm taking a history test, I don't want to like study English or mathematics. If I'm taking a history test, I want to study history. So if I'm going to do an anti-movement, an anti-rotation, or anti-flexion exercise, if that's my test, then that's how I should train that. Okay. Then if we think of the psoas muscles, there's tons of things you can do to just, if you just do a simple YouTube or Google search for psoas exercises, you'll see there's a ton out there. But that's something you definitely want to address. So if you're not addressing psoas, the psoas, directly, you definitely want to start now. So that'll help a ton to help with hip positioning, hip tilt. And then you want to strengthen your lower back. Most people already know this. So most people, they're going to be doing deadlifts, back extensions, 45-degree hypers, reverse hypers, stiff leg deadlifts. They're going to be most likely doing that kind of stuff in their training. But what you want to think of is your abs should be as strong as your lower back. So if I do ab movements, and compared to most people, I do them really well. But then if I compare my lower back exercises to most people in my same sport or same genre, but I'm not very good compared to most people, then that shows there's possibly a discrepancy. So it's not like there's an actual test where you can do an X amount of weight on a crunch relates to an X amount of weight on a back extension. There's not really like that kind of correlation going on. But if you know in your training you suck at abs and you do a lot of lower back stuff, then you probably want to do more abs to create that balance. But then likewise with CrossFit athletes I've worked with, and I've worked with CrossFit athletes that have gone to the CrossFit Games, so pretty high-level guys and girls, and their lower back sometimes are weak as hell. So they do everything so uprighted, like Olympic lifts, overhead squats, where overhead squats do work your lower back, but it's not usually a very heavy load, weight load, compared to like a traditional just back squat. So they do a lot of high bar squatting rather than low bar squatting. So I've seen a ton of CrossFit athletes have the strongest core and really insanely strong quads, but they have no hamstrings, no butt, no lower back. So their posterior chain is just kind of gone. It's not even existent. So whenever we've trained, I take the philosophy of, train your weakest things the most. You still need to train your strong things and keep your strong things strong, but you need to hyper focus on those weaknesses and get those things going. So try to balance out your body, especially in CrossFit, where your goal is to be an overall balanced athlete. So that's definitely something to look into, is making sure that you have a balanced ability between your lower back and abs. Okay, so like we said, most people are going to be addressed this way by saying, hey, make sure your abs are strong enough to protect your lower back. Well, CrossFit athletes, make sure your lower back is strong enough to protect its damn self. So make sure it has its own strength. And then lastly, the thing we think of in strongman and powerlifting sometimes, especially men, they don't train their glutes enough. So they'll have kind of like a big belly, with some decent ab muscle to it. They'll have a thick lower back, but then they have no butt, so they have the no acetal disease. So if you ever heard of that. So some of you might be laughing. Some of you have no clue what I just said. But basically they'll have no butt. And then they wonder why they have low back pain or why they're not stable. And it's because your lower back is trying to do every damn thing itself. So you have to develop a butt. You have to develop glute muscles so that way they can aid the back and help out in the process of stabilization. So stabilizing the hip. So that's going to be your idea for core training, is you need to not only just do a bunch of crunches, that's not going to help as much. So you need to target the obliques in anti-rotation and anti-flexion. You want to train your psoas specifically. Make sure you do exercises that directly target your psoas. You want to make sure you have a balance between your lower back strength and ab strength, and vice, like I said, both directions. And then you want to make sure you're doing something to grow your glutes. Make sure your glutes are not visually behind the rest of your muscular development. And find some exercises that test glute strength, and make sure that you're good at those exercises. Make sure that they're up to par with the rest of your strength levels on your other exercises. Okay? So that's just one component. So core training is one component of how to increase stabilization during moving events. Another component is breathing techniques. So are we actually breathing correctly when we're doing these events? So the best way to breathe for intra-abdominal pressure and stabilization is what would be considered almost like belly breathing, in the sense to where if anybody's listening to this right now and you're kind of standing or sitting stationary, see if you can take in long, slow, deep breaths without your chest raising. So you can sit there, put your hand on your chest, see if you can take a big breath in where you'll feel your belly expand, but your chest doesn't raise up and drop back down when you're breathing. So you want to breathe in, hold the breath, and then breathe out. And see if you can do that without your chest lifting. So that's how you would want to breathe whenever you're doing these events, is you have to make sure that you have intra-abdominal pressure, and like your core, your belly, your obliques, your lower back, everything feels nice, stable, and braced. If you're breathing in and out of your chest, that's going to create flexion and small movement and variation in your like thoracic spine. It's going to cause like a contract release of your obliques and ab wall as your rib cage is lifting up and down, up and down, up and down. So you want to be breathing almost like through your belly, in a sense to where can you breathe without your chest raising up. So again, just take long, slow, deep breaths in and out, and practice breathing without your chest raising up. So one of the things I did way back when, it was probably like, well, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, was I'd watching some videos and I saw somebody do they were laying on the floor, but they had their feet up on a wall, and they were mimicking the position of a squat. So it's kind of like a wall squat, but not your back against the wall, your feet are against the wall. So your back's on the ground, you're really scooted up close to a wall, and your feet are flat on the wall. And what they were doing was they were blowing up a balloon. And what they wanted that position was when they would breathe in, they could feel their lower back pressing into the floor, and then they would breathe out into the balloon while their lower back was still pressing against the floor. And what you'll notice is doing that is you get really awesome activation of that belly breathing type concept. And you can watch, like one hand will be holding the balloon, the other hand you can put on your chest, and you can feel, are you raising your chest, which would then pick your lower back almost up off the floor. You'd feel it depressurized from the floor. And then whenever your chest would drop, you'd feel that pressure back into the lower back into the floor. So if you do chest breathing, you'll feel that pressure kind of like lessen and increase of that lower back into the floor. When you belly breathe, that lower back will be contacted to the floor, solid and stable. So that's one technique you can use, is doing like kind of a wall squat. And again, it's the back on the floor, feet on the wall, and breathing into a balloon, and seeing if you can do that without your chest raising. So I got really good at that because I liked the idea of it. I felt awesome when I did that. And that actually helped me get through a lot of lower back pain. I have a slip disc in my back. So I've got an x-ray done, and you can see the discs, are all in a line, and then there's this one that shoots out a little bit to the left, and that's where I have all my stupid pain. So I used to have back pain. I had back pain every single day, all day for 14 months, and that was horrible. My workouts were down to the point where I would have to do a really long warm-up. Might be able to get out like 6 to 8 singles on squats, and then I'd kind of be flared up, it'd be inflamed, and I'd be screwed for the rest of the day. So I came back from that and fixed a lot of stuff. And learning how to breathe correctly helped a ton towards my back health. And then also all that core training stuff that I told you guys before, that helped a ton as well. So if anybody has any disc issues, this stuff will help as well. So that's the idea. So we have a core training we talked already through what all that includes. Then you have breathing techniques. And what we talked about there is learning to breathe more in your belly without your chest lifting and raising. So then we have to do is the next kind of tip would be to include loaded movement cardio. So what you can do as part of every warm-up to every workout or every finish to every workout is you can do 5 to 10 minutes of either intervals or just straight time and just do some type of loaded carry. So I prefer to do typically odd positions or unilaterally loaded rather than like a heavy kind of basic carry, because it kind kind of can wear you down, and it can take away from that day's training. So one of the things I'll do is I'll grab a sandbag, like we have a 100-pound sandbag. I'll throw that sucker up on one of my shoulders, and I'll just start walking around. And at about every minute, I'll switch to the other shoulder. Then a minute later, switch to the other shoulder, and maybe I'll walk around and do that for 6 minutes. Then I'll come back inside, drop the sandbag down, and go on about my workout. And that's a really good activation for the core. Gets you tired, not a breath, too. So it helps you be less of a fatty. But it's a great way to kind of activate those muscles, get a little bit of a stimulus on them every training session. But it's not going to wear you out so bad you can't work out that day. So that's one idea. You can do light yoke carries, and it can be like a traditional just back carry. So back squat type position carry. You can do a front squat position carry. You can do a zerker carry. But again, it's lightweight. You can just do intervals. So, maybe you pick a distance, 100 feet. You carry it 100 feet, you set it down. 20 seconds later, you pick it up, carry it 100 feet, set it down. 20 seconds later, you pick it up, carry it 100 feet, set it down. So you can just kind of do like some intervals like that, like every minute on the minute. Or you can just set up like, I'm going to go this distance, take a 30-second rest, and do that like 6 to 8 times, something like that. So I tended to keep my my category of that between 5 to 10 minutes because it's long enough that it matters, especially if you do it 2, 3, 4 times a week. But it's not so long that it wears you out for the rest of your workout. Okay? And then we also have farmer's carries you can do for time. You can do one-arm farmer's carries or, both arms. You can do uneven barbell carries. So that's one of my favorite things is my dad made for me a set of these like hanging, I don't even know what the heck they would be. It's like a weight load peg. So a 2-inch peg that has like an extended flat washer bottom, and you would typically load plates onto that for like gripping exercises. Well, he made one of those weightlifting pegs, but he made like a 4-foot chain connected to it with a big loop on the end that slides onto a barbell. So you can slide the weight onto the peg, then connect that loop up onto the barbell, put like a weight collar clip on, and I'll actually load just one side of the barbell. So I'll put on like say 25 or 45 pound plate on one side, and I'll get into like a squatting position, like a back squat position, and I'll be pulling the bar kind of like, down into my back, but then I'll walk around with that. And that whole time, that weight on that one side wants to rip you to that side or tilt you over. So you're locking your obliques, you're locking your lats, you're locking everything on that opposing side to stay braced. And that's a really good way to kind of work on that anti-flexion, anti-sideways flexion. So that's a really cool variation. So just kind of hanging weights. And you can use bands if you don't have that weird chain connector. Since my dad made it for me, I doubt you have it. But you can use bands and just hang some plates off the bar on either one side, or you can kind of hang plates on both sides with different types of bands and create a little bit of like chaos on chaos carry, for example. But that's the idea. So you would use increased, use more often in your training, loaded movement cardio as a warm-up or cool-down. And that'll help a ton as well. Because during that, you can even work on your breathing. Okay? So you can work on belly breathing while you're doing that. So that's 5 minutes of practice. Well, 5 to 10 minutes, however long you do it. But that's time for you to practice that concept. And then that way, whenever you go onto the big lift for the day, whether it's squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, log carries, overhead squats, blah, 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 whatever your kind of main event will be, you already have the concept of breathing practiced. You already have your core balancing and bracing muscles activated for the day. So you're much more kind of like ready to go. And then the last thing is just kind of a catch-all, would be to eliminate any like known weaknesses you have in your extremities. So, for example, there's going to be like too many for me to go through all of those examples. But one example would be is if I want to get better at an overhead movement, and I know that I have instability, like when I when I have a hold a weight over my head, and it feels like, man, my shoulder just does not like lock down and hold position. You might want to look at your upper back bracing. Maybe you're not bracing through like your rhomboids, lower traps, teres major, like you don't have your lats, like all those muscles kind of locking your shoulder in place. So there's an exercise I like to do for people called a banded Cuban press, and there's a bunch of other ones out there as well. But it's basically like you take a band and you have a band anchored to something in front of you, and you're going to kind of like overhead press, and that band is trying to pull your hands forward, but you're going to brace through your back and then only press vertically. So you have to fight the forward tension of that band through back bracing. So that's going to be a way to kind of eliminate any kind of positional weakness. So you can have as strong as a core as ever, but if you don't know how to brace your shoulders correctly, then that's going to break everything down. So you do have to look at kind of the technical aspects of the positions that you want to be in, and make sure that you understand how to brace correctly, like through the shoulder blades if it's an overhead movement. Make sure you know how to brace correctly. Like part of the correct breathing would be keeping your rib cage in place and locked in, making sure your ribs aren't flared out in front of you and your lower back being arched. So make sure you're breathing correctly to lock in your kind of rib cage and lower back. And then any kind of like hip motions or involved motions is, can I maintain the proper hip tilt while I might have to change the flexion angle of my hip. So maybe I have to flex and extend my hip multiple times, like an overhead squat, for example. Can I have correct hip tilt not only at the top of the squat, but throughout the entire motion of the squat? And that helps a lot as well. Yeah, it's definitely going to be important to look at. So, this was, again, like we said, kind of conceptual, but if you address these issues towards your sport, it would help you in whatever the heck you're doing, so whatever your sport is. So improving your technique retention, which means like you have good technique, but as you start moving, as you get tired, everything breaks down. Well, how do you prevent that? So how do you prevent that is by training your core. Like we said, that's the obliques, the psoas, making sure there's a balance between your abs and low back strength, and make sure your glutes are developed well enough to help out towards that hip tilt control. Then we have breathing techniques, learning to kind of breathe through our belly in a sense, to where you're pulling the air into you without lifting and dropping your chest. So your chest needs to stay locked in place. Then we have using loaded movement cardio as like a warm-up or cool down to your workouts. So that's going to help a ton as well, because it gives you a chance to practice the position, practice your breathing. Those will be, in their own sense, a form of core training, because you're going to be challenged to hold the correct position while you're doing those as well. And then we have trying to eliminate any kind of weaknesses you can identify. So if you're having trouble with overhead movements, don't just train your core, like I say in this one, but also look at your overhead positioning. So is my back braced correctly? Or am I kind of am I trying to hold everything in my muscles? Or am I letting my joints kind of lock in place and kind of settle in to be a good, strong stabilizers for me? So hopefully that was some good food for thought. So give it a try. If you have any specific questions in regards to this, feel free to reach out to us at brutalirongym@gmail.com. So if there's anything specific for you individually that you want to maybe ask us about, feel welcome to. Okay? So hopefully this was helpful. And if you do like this type of information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share it. Okay? So the more people we help, the happier the world's going to be. And then if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we would love, love, love to hear from you. Just like the person who requested this topic, we love having topic suggestions so that we know we're creating content that you guys are interested in. Okay? And you can reach us at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.